James, when's dinner?
You can't rush perfection, guys. Just wait.
Brisket's ready.
James, it's 1 in the morning.
A big thanks to KiwiCo for bringing you today's video ad interruption free. Whether it's a family gathering, an event, or a barbecue competition, there isn't a question that comes across my inbox more frequently than, James, when do I need to start my barbecue in order to have it ready for when we actually want it? Recently, I had the opportunity to join Steve Gow's from Smoke Trails Barbecue competition barbecue team at Memphis in May earlier this year. And if there is a place where getting your food done on time matters, it's in a competition setting, as the turn-in window is often only something like 20 minutes. And if you miss it, you miss it. But even though we're not talking about competition barbecue, the cook that I'll be using for today's example is for a charity event where I am turning in a couple items to help raise money for cancer research. The party starts at 5 o'clock. So whether it's an event that you're catering, like the example I'll be doing today, a competition barbecue, and or just family dinner, the idea of getting your food to be done at a specific time can apply to a whole bunch of different contexts. And that's what we're gonna go through today. So this video is for you if you fit into one of these 3 buckets. So the first one comes down to space. Not everybody has the grill real estate like the Smoke North Echo that I was using for my party cook, but I've done this on my Kamado Joe. What if you have, one grill, like normal people, and you want to fit more things that you can actually stuff inside your grill? I'm going to walk through how to do that. I've done a party cook before with things like brisket, ribs, or chicken on my Kamado Joe, and take advantage of the grill that you have to cook more than what you can possibly fit. The second variation of that is how to manage things that cook in very different times. The 3 things that I'm cooking for this event is brisket, 4 racks of ribs, and 2 chickens. Well, the chickens have very different cook times than something like a brisket, and this applies to any iteration or combination that you might dream up for your cook at home. And so how do we manage different cooks landing at the exact same time? And the third variation of that, and last, quite simply, is simply having a target time in mind. Whether it's friends, family coming over, a barbecue competition, and or an event that you're catering, the notion of time is something, again, that comes up in questions over and over and over again. And so I really want to focus in on that. Since I'm going to be focusing in on these 3 particular details in terms of how to get your food done on time, I'm not going to spend all the time covering things like how I trimmed the brisket, the seasoning, the rub, as I've got dedicated cooks to briskets, ribs, as well as chicken, and I don't want this video to blow up into an hour-long episode. So I'll put links down below to some of those cooks with more details if you're trying to focus in on a brisket, ribs, or chicken, and you want all the behind-the-scenes details in terms of some of the things that you'll see in the B-roll footage that I was doing to each of these items. But I really, again, want to zero in on this common question of how do I remove the stress of getting food done at a specific time? Speaking of a specific time, you can change the details as you need for whatever your goal is. But for me, I'm going to be using 5 o'clock Sunday afternoon. That's when the catering is due for the barbecue party and the fundraiser that I'm participating in. So everything in the work back schedule will be working back from 5 o'clock Sunday afternoon. But if you have this on Saturday, obviously, move and adjust as needed. But that's going to be the illustration that I'll use in terms of walking you through the decisions that I've had to make in order to get everything done at that exact time. So to remove the stress of getting your barbecue to be finished when you want it, I'm gonna break this into 3 sections. So first, the prep, then our cook, as well as our services. There's some unique things that we can do in each of those 3 stages to get us ready. But I will mention, it doesn't matter really for this what grill you're following along on, whether it be Kamado Joe like I've done in the past where I want to fit more things that I can actually stuff inside of a Kamado Joe, or you happen to be following along on something like the Smoke North Echo Offset, which I used for most of this cook. And the reason again here is if I was going to be doing 1 fire, I could take advantage of the cost of running my offset and getting everything on there. So you'll see in a couple of the B-roll clips, the brisket, the ribs, as well as chicken on something like my Echo, but that doesn't matter. If you're saying, wow, I can't fit everything on my grill. I've done this no problem with a grill with much less real estate, and I'll sort of walk you through how to do that. So don't feel like you need something as spacious as something like my Smoke North Echo in order to follow along. So let's dive into prep.
I'm bored. Oh! What about me? Oh!
So as parents, Sarah and I have actually been customers of KiwiCo for the past couple of years. In fact,
as a teacher, I have loved KiwiCo, and we got it for our youngest, and it was the highlight of her month. It would come in the mail, and it made learning fun. I always am looking for opportunities to bring STEM into just home and fun and discovery, and this was an awesome opportunity to do that.
it's great. I've seen firsthand, our kids absolutely love them. KiwiCo makes seriously fun learning for kids of all ages. KiwiCo provides a monthly crate delivered to your door with fun, hands-on projects that are designed by experts and tested by kids. With 9 different lines, there is something for every interest and age group, even newborn babies. Just need a single crate and not ready to subscribe? No problem. KiwiCo also offers a variety of individual crates at the KiwiCo store. From robots to ice cream making, you'll find something exciting for every kid. They make amazing gifts and are a great way to experience KiwiCo crates before subscribing. If you're ready to give KiwiCo a try, be sure to check out the link along with the code in the description down below to save up to 50% off your first monthly lines. All the details I'll put down in the description along with the code that you need at checkout to make that happen. Big thanks to KiwiCo for sponsoring this video and bringing the rest of the video to you ad interruption free. Now, back to the action. So prep, one of the least exciting but most important aspects of getting this problem to be a thing of the past comes down to preparation. My oldest daughter is going through new driver training now. She's reached the age where she can go for her license. And before she can do that, there's a whole bunch of in-class work. And every day I hear the stories of just how unexciting that is. We want to get to the good stuff, jumping behind the wheel and actually driving. But before you can do that, you need some preparation. The same is true with our brisket. We want to jump straight to the money shot of slicing the brisket, seeing the fold over, the bend test, and the most important part, actually tasting the barbecue. But behind all of those things that go really well, it comes down to preparation. And this is even more important if you happen to be following along in something like I'm using regularly, a Kamado style grill, as our interactions with the fire are limited. And something like my Smoke North Echo, I might interact with the fire 15 plus times over the course of a brisket cook. On my smaller Oklahoma Joe's Highland offset, that's about 30 interactions with a fire. And so while this video, as I mentioned, isn't about the style of cooker that you're using, that is an important distinction, particularly as it comes down to prep. If I am using smoking wood, for example, that has a little bit too high of a moisture content in order to get nice clean combustion, you'll often see me place it on the top of my firebox in order to sort of drive out some of the moisture, so when I add it into my firebox, I get nice clean combustion. And so if I'm building 30 fires on a smaller offset, one bad fire represents about 3% of my total cook. This is where it kind of comes back to the preparation. On a Kamado style grill, the charcoal and the wood that we add in getting everything right, that prep represents potentially 100% of our cook and the quality of the smoke that we're going to get on our food. And so even though it's not as exciting as the slicing and tasting brisket, I hope that you'll stick with me and sort of unpack just how important the preparation is in terms of turning out a great result. So since the brisket is the largest item as well as the slowest to cook that I will be doing in the 3 proteins that I'm doing for service, brisket, ribs, as well as chicken, it's also the happiest to hang out for a longer period of time in the hot hold method, which we will be using. I'll get to a little bit later on. The same would be true for our pork shoulder. So they can take more time in a salt brine, they can take more time in a smoker, and they can take more time in a hot hold. So that is part of the reason why I want to get to work on this. So starting my salt brine 48 hours in advance is going to give me an opportunity to start to tenderize this large brisket. So I'm only going to make 2 adjustments to my Brisket 101 video. So if you're following along and want to get more details, that'll be a great reference. So the first one I'm going to make sort of running contrary to what's in my 101 video is the method of injecting tallow to up upgrade a choice grade brisket into a prime grade brisket. This is something that I use regularly, where I take the brisket trims, render them down into tallow, and inject that back into the flat in order to take a choice up to a prime grade. I'm not going to do that for today's cook, because we have a number of other things going on, and the brisket that I picked up doesn't look like that it needs it. And so that's an important thing to mention here, is grading of your brisket is done on the carcass at the whole level. They're not broken down into all the different cuts, whether it be the briskets, the chuck, or the steaks and everything. They are not individually graded. The carcass is graded. And so even though Costco near me is selling a choice grade brisket, there are times where it's absolutely choice, if not erring on the side of select. And there are choice grade briskets that are looking exactly the same as a prime grade brisket. And that's what I was lucky enough to find with this brisket that was just pushing shy of 20 pounds. The other ratio that I'll spend some time on that's not in my 101 video, but I've shared in a couple new videos this year, is the ratio of the thickness of the flat as well as the point. And so if you ever find yourself in a spot where you're getting wildly sort of different donenesses, where your flat is ready and you want to pull it off, but you're probing the point end and it's not quite done, and you say, I want to even this out. I don't want to sacrifice my flat in order to get a good point, or I don't want to have a great point and then completely go nuclear on my flat. This all comes down to a ratio. And so I found by trimming the mohawk and the decal and getting brisket into sort of a 2-to-1 ratio or less, I'm getting much better results. I'll put that graphic up on screen that sort of shows the average result that I've been getting with a much more effective trim ratio between the thickness of the flat and the brisket. And this, again, while we're in the preparation category, comes down to the purchase decision that we make. So if you are browsing your local grocery store, Costco, or Sam's Club, wherever you might be buying your brisket, same for your butcher, is try to avoid briskets where you've got a 0.5 inch or an inch flat to a 5-6 inch point. That degree of slope in our brisket is going to make things much easier. And since I get a better result cooking the brisket all together than I do separating the point from the flat, this has been something that has been a game changer in terms of getting repeatable, consistent results without having to make a decision of which side of the brisket am I going to sacrifice in order to get a good other half. That will completely solve that issue for you. So 7 a.m. Saturday, this is when I'm going to move on to our next stage, and that's firing up my Smoke North Echo for a bit of a cold smoke. So in the past, you might have heard me build a heat soak fire, let the 900 pounds of raw steel come up to temperature before I get my food on. I saw Cooper from Bar A Barbecue explain to my friend Al from Eat More Vegans in one of his Secrets of the Master episodes that they love to break their smoke into 2 stages. First, cold smoking to get started, followed by the actually finished cooking, the hot smoke if you want to call that. And I tried applying that recently in my Kamado Joe. If Texas pitmasters were using Kamados, what would they do differently if they were applying their tips and techniques to a Kamado style grill? And I cooked 6 pork shoulders using a pellet tube smoker in order to get some cold smoke before moving into a hot smoke. And admittedly here, this is the best pulled pork I've ever done on a Kamado style grill. That was absolutely fantastic. And so this is my next opportunity to try this notion of cold smoking before moving into hot smoking. And so all that means simply is I'm gonna start my fire and immediately put the brisket on at 7 a.m. and keep my vents a little bit tighter than I normally would. I wanna make sure I see open flame at all times, just like Cooper mentioned from Bar A Barbecue, but rather than just let the vents open and the temperature soar and those hot gases fly through the chamber, I'm gonna let that more gradually heat soak the pit in terms of coming up to temperature and take advantage of a smokier profile for those first few hours that I have the brisket on my smoker. 7:30 a.m. now we have 2 important things. One, the most important, another coffee. It's early in the morning when we were getting our brisket on. Now that it's on, I prioritized another coffee, and more importantly for us in terms of our turn-in is getting our chickens ready. So we're gonna do a couple things for our chicken. So the first thing, like normal, I'm going to spatchcock these birds. That's just going to make a presentation slicing all the way up the breast for the party platter that I'll be serving these on much easier, as well as an opportunity to do a 2-stage brine. Chicken, if we sort of talk about brisket and chicken, brisket is food safe at 160, 165 degrees. You can eat this, no problem. but it would be tough as nails. So safe versus good is not the same thing. And so everybody understands that with brisket or pulled pork, but where there's a lot of confusion is on something like chicken. So the FDA says your chicken is safe at 165 degrees in the thigh, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's good. These are not one and the same. But unlike brisket or pulled pork, where we can go way beyond safe temperatures and get even better results, our chicken is not as forgiving in terms of being able to overshoot our temperatures. So we're gonna do a couple things to solve this notion of safe versus amazing. And the first part to do that is our two-stage brine. So I'm going to wet brine these birds for about 4 hours in 2 liters of buttermilk with a half cup of Diamond Crystal kosher salt. And that is going to help tenderize the protein as well as start to make sure that it is absorbing some of that salt to retain more moisture. After that, I'm gonna pat them dry, rinse them, pat them dry, and put on our dry brine, and that is going to start to get to work on our skin. This two-stage brine is going to allow us to go to slightly higher internal temperatures, which normally would be at the risk of drying out the chicken, but instead of drying out the chicken, if we do this and get it right, we're gonna get amazing, flavorful, tender, juicy chicken, and our skin is going to be next level, smoky and crispy bite through chicken skin, which is exactly what we want. And this method has been turning out absolute wonders. If you've been following any of my backyard barbecue rescue series, there's been a couple opportunities to do chicken, and this is what I've shared with the families, and they've been blown away at the difference this makes. So if you haven't tried it, I definitely encourage you to give it a go on your next chicken. And the other thing I'm going to apply, just like my 101 video, is this notion of a compound butter injection. I've done this for every turkey in the last couple years in the channel, where we've made up our own compound butter by melting down some butter, adding things like garlic, rosemary, thyme, whatever flavor profile that you want to go for, but making up a compound butter that we can then inject into our bird is not only going to give us an opportunity to get even more flavor, but as well some of that juiciness. I like to inject, it's hard to see on the camera, but on a slight downward angle. And so by going on a downward angle, whether I'm injecting tallow in a brisket or injecting compound butter into a bird, as that squeezes out, those muscles tighten, it's going to be squeezing the butter up and out. But like a snail leaves a bit of a trail on the surface that it's just walked over, same is with our injection, whether it's tallow or butter. In this case, it's going to leave a deposit of that buttery flavor goodness with whatever flavor compounds that we've added to it as it works its way out. And of course, some will still stay inside of our bird. It's not like we lose absolutely everything, but this is going to give us the absolute best result in terms of amping up the flavor and the juiciness of our chicken. So now we're at about 9 in the morning, and I've got my 3 chickens in the briner bucket. If you don't have a briner bucket, you can do the same thing with Ziploc bags or any sort of, even a clean pail if you have that, and throw it in the refrigerator. I'm just using a briner bucket because it has one of those clamp tools that keeps everything submerged, so I know that it's getting the brine evenly all the way throughout. But that is now in the refrigerator, so we can get to work on our ribs. And so I'm gonna be doing these 4 racks of ribs, they're St. Louis ribs. I'm gonna be doing them competition style, which is going to give me the rib tips, which I'm gonna set aside and save for a Pitmaster snack, since I'm gonna be getting these on the grill around 3 o'clock later the same day on Saturday. So we're still Saturday, turning in everything for 5 o'clock on Sunday. The rib tips, as well as 1 of the 3 chickens, is going to be family dinner. Everything else is going for food service. Since I'm sticking more competition style for these St. Louis ribs, I'm going to remove the membrane, even though I've done a side-by-side, and it, in my opinion, doesn't make a huge difference. Right off the back of Memphis in May, I felt guilty not doing that, so it's a quick step just to pull off the membrane. And I'm going to use mustard for a binder, and then apply my Ultimate Texas SPG rub that I share on my website. Now, a quick word on that. This is an amazing rub. I use it on every large cut brisket, a pork shoulder. It is too salty. Do not overnight dry brine things like chicken wings or ribs with this rub, as it has too much salt for that. Instead, I've developed a variation that tastes very similar that I call my wing dust recipe, which is more suitable for an overnight dry brine. But since my plan is to get these ribs on at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it's 9 o'clock in the morning right now, This is not going to have too much time for that salt to work these thinner cuts of St. Louis ribs. So I'm gonna get my Ultimate Texas SPG rub on these and get them in the refrigerator just shortly after 9 in the morning before bringing them out to get them on our smoker later on in the day for about 3 o'clock. Shortly after 11 in the morning is just when I passed over the 4-hour mark for the chicken. So this is when I want to get them out of the buttermilk, wet brine, rinse that off, and start to go for our dry brine, as well as injecting our butter. Just like if you've ever done the Guga shared an experiment many years ago of, pineapple pulp, grind up a fresh pineapple, put it on a steak, it's a tenderizer. The same is true with buttermilk and chicken. There's a period of time where there's an advantage to doing that. And then there's a period where if you overshoot it, you can start to break down some of the proteins in the meat and get a texture that's not really appealing. And so something like the pineapple on a steak, 30 to 60 minutes is as far as you want to go. The buttermilk is not quite as aggressive as pineapple on steak, but I get my best results in 4 to no more than 8 hours. You could stretch this as far as you want to go, but I just don't see a benefit between the 4 and the 8 hours that is equal to or greater than those 4 extra hours of being in the fridge to dry out and get crispier skin. So I'm gonna choose the better option for me, which is crispier skin versus 4 extra hours in the buttermilk brine. But if you are out and about and doing chores, just know that anywhere from 4 to 8 hours is when you want to remove the birds from the buttermilk brine, but I would not recommend going beyond the 8-hour mark. So after drying those off, injecting them with our compound butter and getting our dry rub on they can go in the refrigerator where they are going to sit until tomorrow. I'm gonna pack up 2 of them to take with me to cook on site. So if dinner is again at 5 o'clock, I will be cooking those at 4 o'clock. I'll come back to that a little bit later. And the third chicken, since Costco sells these in a 3-pack, which you're gonna see on the grill later on today, is going to be part of family dinner along with those rib tips. Let's move now into some of the decisions that we're going to make on our cook and rest. I know you've been hearing multiple different timestamps of where we are on Saturday, when we're gonna get things ready for Sunday. So there's some really important details in terms of our cook times as well as our rest times based off the various internal temperatures that we're gonna go through. So let's unpack that now. So you made it through the preparation. Now we're getting progressively more exciting. So we are into our cook and rest. But before fully unpacking this, I want to mention a quick thing about dirty smoke. I mentioned the game plan on my offset is to run dirtier smoke for the first couple of hours, or you heard me mention replicating this in the Kamado Joe where I used a pellet tube smoker. A quick word on dirty smoke, particularly if you happen to be following along with a Kamado style grill. This comes up in YouTube titles all the time, the benefits of dirty smoke, but all dirty smoke is not created equal. When I'm talking about dirty smoke in something like my Echo reverse flow, if I open up the firebox, there is always open, visible flame. I'm burning the flame nice and clean at all times, but I've got my damper tied down just to the point where I can maintain an open flame, but not be drawing all that smoke and having a high velocity of hot gases over my food. This is the ideal dirty smoke. If you're saying, hey, I hear in videos that dirty smoke is a good idea, I can do that in my Kamado style grill, which is incredibly efficient. This is not the same dirty smoke. This is creosote. If we have our Kamado style grill completely clamped down with barely any bottom vent, barely any top vent, and we've got wood smoldering, this is not burning at a temperature that is giving us good flavor compounds. This is giving us creosote. If you're looking for a bit more information in terms of how to get good smoke, I've also done an updated smoking wood guide for Kamado style grills. That's down in the description if you want to check that out. But that includes a couple myth busting things in terms of things like soaking your wood, where that makes absolutely no difference if you use a humidity meter on that wood, unless you have a couple weeks of preparation. But the idea of doing things like 2 hours, for example, absolutely makes no difference in terms of the humidity level on the wood, as dense woods like we're using for hardwood and smoking woods don't absorb moisture on wood chunks in 2 to 4 hours as confirmed by a moisture meter, and there's a whole bunch more I can't talk about today, but if you're having some trouble in terms of getting good smoking wood results in a Kamado style grill, there's a resource that I've just released available down below if you want to check that out. So the game plan for me though for today is to take advantage of the good dirty smoke for the first few hours, and then start to transition after about 2 hours into a cooking smoke where I'm running more in the 270 degree Fahrenheit range with about another inch or so on the top damper is where I was running to transition from that dirty smoke, sort of that 200 degree Fahrenheit range, into the 270 degree Fahrenheit range for my cooking fire. The brisket is starting again, our starting time was 7 in the morning, and it's gonna go till whenever it reaches 195 degrees Fahrenheit internal temperature, and we're gonna transition to the hot rest. For me, that happened to be midnight until this large brisket on an offset, which again, historically will take about 20 to 30% longer than a Kamado style grill. And I've raced this against a direct flow offset, and it's again 20 to 30% faster than a direct flow. So you can obviously adjust your start times accordingly, but I knew that this would get me done and not too of an unreasonable hour after bedtime before I can transition to the hot hold. The only thing that I want to do before moving to the hot hold is let that brisket rest on the counter until I see the temperatures starting to come down. If you were to immediately wrap, so whether we cooked to probe tenderness, let's say we're 203 or something like that, probing tender, and we were to wrap in foil, put it in a towel, and put it in a cooler, immediately coming outside of the grill, we will overcook our brisket because the brisket is still continuing to climb. The same is true with the long hot hold. If we reach 195 degrees, the temperature is climbing and immediately go into a warm oven. Well, eventually that will reach equilibrium and start to come down. We run the risk of overcooking our brisket. So giving that a minimum 20-30 minutes until you see in potentially your meter chart or whatever smart probe you might be using, or a physical probe, or even a spot probe, you start to see temperatures coming down. This is what you want to wait until you move to the hot hold technique. Taking a page from Goldie's, I'm going to add 1 cup of rendered beef tallow into the bottom of the foil wrapped brisket in order to help that absorb back into the brisket, as well as soften anything on the bottom that got a little bit crunchy. We weren't in bad shape, didn't need it here, but this is something, again, Goldie's does with all their briskets. And since I had a large amount of trimmings, I was able to make plenty of tallow while I was cooking the brisket. So not only did I have enough for the 1 cup to add to the bottom of this brisket, I now have a fridge full of tallow that I can inject in future briskets that I find that are below that prime grade quality that I might want to upgrade. So that is now wrapped tightly in a foil pouch. So that is into my oven now that I've overridden, which normally has a maximum or a low temperature of 170 degrees Fahrenheit, but I could adjust that negatively to bring that down to 150 degrees Fahrenheit. You know, quick shout out to my friend Steve Gao from Smoke Trails Barbecue, who not only was kind enough to invite me to be part of his competition barbecue team at Memphis in May this year, but Steve has also been a pioneer of trying to reverse engineer different restaurants' hot holding techniques in terms of recreating some of these great results at home. So Steve has been a bit of a pioneer here in terms of finding out when and where to pull things like brisket, ribs, and pork shoulders off and get them in your oven. But speaking of an oven, there is wildly different calibrations on ovens. And so the only way to figure this out is to use some probes. And the key thing when you hear somebody like Goldie's talk about holding their briskets at 140 degrees Fahrenheit, this is the temperature of the brisket, not the temperature of the oven. If you set your oven to 140 degrees, as I once tried, you'll find your brisket is down into the 110 to 114 degree Fahrenheit range, which is starting to be below the FDA recommendation of food safe temperatures. In fact, I think the FDA says the minimum, if I recall from memory, I'll put it on the screen, is 140 degrees Fahrenheit. We do not want to have cooked food go below that threshold. So the way to figure this out, at least early on in terms of what you can get in your oven, is to have a probe inside the food as well as a probe on the oven, and just start playing with different settings until you start to see things holding nice and stable for about an hour. If it's holding nice and flat for an hour, you can figure you can lock that into the bank, whatever your adjustment is. But when you hear me now talk about a holding temperature of the brisket at 150 degrees Fahrenheit, I am talking about the brisket itself and not the oven. for my oven and the adjustments that I've made, it just happens to be the negative 27 or whatever degrees Fahrenheit. I had to put in the settings to get it there is what I need, but that may not be the same for you. So do take a moment when you have the time, perhaps not at midnight when you're tired and ready to get to bed, to find out exactly that threshold will be. As when we've switched our oven, we had to replace it, the same settings, I saw a 20 Fahrenheit difference. So not all ovens, including from the same manufacturer, are calibrated exactly the same. So do make sure you take the time to figure out what that might be for you, as your mileage definitely will vary. So that's the brisket. Let's go back to 3:30 in the afternoon for our ribs. So they were, again, put in the dry brine shortly after 9:30 in the morning. So around 3:30 in the afternoon is when I wanted to get the ribs on. And again, all credit to Steve here. I am doing the exact same method that we used for his competition ribs at Memphis in May, by cooking them until the bark is set and they reach a temperature of somewhere between 145 and 155 degrees Fahrenheit. So these are well below what we would normally cook them at, but this is going to allow us to hold them from anywhere from 18 to 24 hours at 155 degrees Fahrenheit internal on the ribs. And so we're essentially sous vide finishing the ribs to tenderness. If you have less time, like maybe 8 to 12 hours, you could bump that holding temperature up to 165 degrees Fahrenheit to get the exact same result. At Memphis in May, you're not allowed to use an oven, even though you can use a pellet grill. And I am incredibly thankful that Steve did this, because this meant that we could cook our ribs in the daylight when we want to be awake and hold them in a pellet grill overnight, and we could all get our beauty sleep in order to be ready for the next day when there was more things to cook and or turn in at the competition. And so this was a game saver, at least for our beauty sleep at a competition, and it's something that I think makes a lot of sense if applying to the backyard. So since we have more time, again, these will be about 4 hours or so on an offset smoker, about 2 hours on a Kamado style grill to reach the bark being set around that 155 degrees Fahrenheit. And then I'm going to pull them off around 7:30 at night, put some lard in a foil pouch, flip them upside down so they're bone side up, meat side down in the lard. You could use beef tallow butter, but Costco sells, if you haven't seen that, these big pails of lard that make it nice and easy to scoop that out, put that in the bottom, and let our ribs hang out in the oven overnight. So they went into the oven around 7:30 or so at night. The brisket went in there at midnight. And again, I was trying to get them both to the same temperature of about 150 degrees internal temperature, where they were going to hang out all the way until tomorrow when we get ready for our service game plan. So speaking of service, let's move to that chapter when we could cook our next 2 chickens. The chicken, again, that I mentioned you saw in the smoker was family dinner, not the actual 2 chickens that we'll be turning in tomorrow. And then we've got some touch-up work to do for service on our brisket as well as our ribs. Okay, so for our service, let's go through some of those finishing touches in order to get everything ready. But maybe answering a question on your mind is, James, why did I choose to hot hold the ribs versus do them same day? Well, since this is Sunday, the event, everything is due at 5 o'clock. It happens to be also my daughter's birthday, and we've got church in the middle. There's just too much stuff going on for me to cook ribs same day, but you could absolutely do this. So don't necessarily feel like you need to do the hot hold on the ribs if you've got plenty of time in order to get those ribs on. Maybe 4 or 5 hours, hold them for a little bit, and then just warm them up and add some sauce. Same day, you could do that. This just happens to fit my schedule for Sunday, and it does an incredible job. It worked for Steve at Memphis in May, works for me in terms of applying it in the backyard as well. And so that's why I chose that route. But by no means do you need to hot hold your ribs as well if you've got the time in order to do that the same day that you're trying to get everything ready. This is what I did on my Kamado style grill, where I cooked the brisket, did a hot hold, got everything out of the grill so I could start a fresh fire in order to get ribs done, let them off and rest, and then get chicken on. And that way I have my chicken hot and fresh and ready, as that's the one thing we can't hold for a long period of time without sacrificing the skin. The ribs, nice and warm, just get some sauce on, tack them up, and then the brisket, bring out of the oven, and it is ready and beautiful to go for service. So you have some options, again, depending on your schedule, and you can make those adjustments as you need. Speaking of the hot hold, this all sounds really good, right? Like positive, positive, positive. There's definitely some pros, but there are also some cons that come with the hot hold method if you choose to use that. Something like brisket can have a finishing temperature anywhere from 197 to 211 degrees Fahrenheit. And the window of getting it absolutely right is about 30 minutes. And so for new people cooking their first few briskets, finding this very small window when there's a whole bunch of other new things going on for the first time is incredibly difficult. That's why I've used the analogy before of chipping. So if you're playing golf, for example, and you need to chip onto a very sloped green in the middle of water, this is near impossible for even the pros to get right, let alone amateur golf players like me. But on contrast, if you had a massive flat green and all you need to do is land the ball on the green, a much larger surface to work with is 10 times easier for even an amateur golfer to hit. And this is what the hot hold method does, is it takes out the precision of needing to know exactly when to pull your brisket, and it neutralizes, sort of brings more people to the same result. Perhaps no restaurant has admitted this, but I suspect it's a big part of, again, if you have new staff, new pit masters, and a crew churning over, this helps reduce some of the variability in terms of the expertise in order to get an amazing result, as well as solves a practical problem of how do you have brisket ready for lunch or ready for dinner. For example, that brisket we put on at 9 in the morning reached 195 at midnight. If I wanted that for dinner, I would have to start at an ungodly hour in terms of being able to manage my offset if that's what I wanted to do in terms of a same day cook. So there are definitely some positives that come with the hot hold method in terms of making it far more consistent and repeatable. But that being said, there are a couple negatives or takeaways in terms of things that we lose. So the first one is smoke. So smoke is in some part not only something that penetrates our food and there's actually a chemical reaction, there's longer lasting smoke, but there's temporary smoke which dissipates, kind of like a perfume, where if you put that on, you might get a pleasant aroma for a couple hours or the same day, but check in a week later, all evidence of that perfume completely gone. And the same is true with some of those finer smoke elements where if they are wrapped in foil and they're hanging out for 18 to 24 hours, or if our ribs are upside down in lard or butter or tallow, you also sacrifice some of that smoke quality. And we also sacrifice some of our bark. We spent all that time working on an amazing bark that has great texture, and if we put things in foil and wrap them overnight, the bark is going to soften up. This is not such a big deal if you're using something like an offset smoker, which can develop a bark that can withstand almost anything, but on my Kamado style grills, that's why I use the foil boat method, is we need all the time in the world, the whole cook, in order to get a passable good grade on our bark, but it is not strong enough in most cases to survive a long hot hold without sacrificing some of the quality of the bark that we worked so hard to build up. So that brings me to now my service touch-up. So this is a problem that we've created by solving another problem with the hot hold where we've lost some of our barks. So a couple hours before service, I'm gonna fire the smoker back up at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Sunday, game day, day of our service, just to help give the ribs and the brisket another hour or two of a lot of convection smoke moving over them to dry everything back out and get our bark back to exactly where it was when we took everything off. I'm not worried about cooking things. We've got the temperature nice and low from our hot hold. I don't want to leave it on much longer and actually start to see the core internal temperature start to rise. I just want to salvage the bark and get things back to exactly where we want it without needing to have the precise skill of getting things done same day. You can absolutely do it. I had to have this situation recently when I was doing my backyard barbecue rescue. My schedule didn't allow me to do things like the hot hold. So for my brisket episode, we needed to show up, prep our brisket the day before, and then do a same day cook, a foil towel cooler rest, and then have everything ready for game day. So you can absolutely pull this off, but this requires, again, the precision of knowing exactly what to feel for if you're using a probe to get things so that they perfectly fold over the finger, pull apart nice and tender, and have amazing smoke flavor. So those are, again, some of the pros and cons to choose from. You can absolutely get to same day, but just know that if you opt for the hot hold method, you might need a little bit of a Band-Aid magic eraser the day of your service to repair some of the bark that we've lost, some of the smoke aroma that we've lost by solving that problem of the hot hold overnight. After about an hour and a half, I took the ribs and the brisket, once the bark had been completely restored, wrapped them tightly in foil, wrapped them in a towel, and put them in my cooler, got them ready to transport, and it was time for me to now head on site. So it's about 2:30 in the afternoon, got there at 3 o'clock, which is 2 hours before our cook, and start to prep a charcoal grill that they had on site. Fire that up so I could cook our 2 chickens and get everything ready for 5 o'clock service. So I was prioritizing the chicken, as that's the one thing, the longer that it hangs out after being cooked, the worse it gets. So that's the one thing I was really concerned about having ready for 5 o'clock. The ribs I removed from their packages and added some sauce and just let that tack up on a propane grill. As again, they were pretty flexible. They're fully cooked and could hang out in foil up to 4 hours. We were only about 2.5 hours, so there was no concerns in terms of the temperature dropping too much in the cooler. And so about half an hour before service, remove them from the foil, put them on the grill, put some sauce on, and just let that tack up, and they were ready for service. And then the brisket, it is super flexible. Again, once I had the chicken sliced, the ribs sliced, I could get to work on carving up the brisket and building our platter, and had it all ready for exactly 5 o'clock on the dot. So that's it. That's the secret to removing the stress of getting your barbecue to be done exactly when you want it. It comes down to some of the not so fun stuff initially in terms of the preparation. That preparation makes a world of difference in terms of the quality of what you're eating, as well as deleting the stress of getting things done exactly what you want. And I hope there's tips and advice in there that help you no matter what you're cooking. Again, the smoker in this example is irrelevant. If you happen to be fortunate enough to be following along on something like what I have, my Smoke North offset, congratulations, it's an awesome smoker. If you're following along on a Kamado style grill, you can apply these same tips and techniques in order to overcome problems of, like, I can't fit ribs, brisket, and a chicken in my grill, so how do I cook multiple things that take different amounts of times and get them done for a very specific window? But this allows you to focus on the fun of having a party or an event with your friends and family and actually enjoy the company, and not be stressed about wondering when your brisket will actually be done and ready for service and missing the dinner milestone by hours. I hope this helps you with your next big cookout, catering event, competition, or whatever you might be doing. Let me know down in the comments if this has helped you, if there's something else that you'd like to see in a future video, or you can ask me in person in one of my upcoming members live. I go live once a month and can interact with you on a real-time basis versus these pre-recorded videos. That's it for today, though. I'm James from Smoke Dad Barbecue signing off. Remember, don't be afraid to fire it up.